All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending. So I will be presenting the Seaside Hotwire integration. My name is Johan Brichot. I work at YesPlan. YesPlan is a cultural venue management system, and it's almost entirely written in Seaside. And actually, the funny coincidence is that this day, 29th of August, 14 years ago, we wrote the first lines of YesPlan. So we've been doing this since quite a while already. And I'll be not talking about YesPlan, but something we will, or I'm trying to apply in YesPlan, and you will see why. So if we look at Seaside, Seaside is, of course, a server web application framework. You write your entire code on the server, and everything executes on the server. Or at least that's how it's designed, right? You create an application in Seaside. You typically do page-based navigation. You render a page, you click on a link, you render the entire new page, and you go further and so further. So that's really a classical and easy view on web applications, what Seaside is doing for you. But a lot of people who are using Seaside and writing Seaside applications, they immediately go into not doing this entirely page-based navigation. They will be using things like JavaScript as well. And for example, Seaside has a nice jQuery integration, which allows you to use a little bit of this single page web application behavior, such as partial page updates, just to have a better and nicer user experience, not having a complete page being re-rendered, but only partially changing parts of the page. And that's what we are doing at YesPlan as well, and that's what I see most of the people who are developing Seaside applications ending up doing. But you also have these things called, well, in this case, it's Hotwire. What is Hotwire? Hotwire is a client application framework, so this is written in JavaScript, but its sole intention is to augment a server-side web application framework with all the abilities to create or use this single-page web application behavior, so things like the partial updates, the things you would do with jQuery manually, and then more integrated into your framework, so that you keep writing your code completely server-side, but still do these things. So its origins are actually in the Ruby on Rails community, which is also a server-side web application framework, and they have developed this, but it's a server, it's completely agnostic from the server application framework you are using. So my thought was, let's integrate this in Seaside and see what it gives. I will be talking, so it actually consists of two parts. It's Turbo and Stimulus. If you go and take a look at the website, you will see there's also a third part, which is coming soon since a couple of years. But I will mostly be talking about, I'll only be talking about the Turbo part, which is why Stimulus there is grayed out. So for those of you who don't know anything about web application development or Seaside, I'll just dive into the demo application that I will be using. And there is this Seaside to-do application, and this is implemented as a traditional Seaside web application. So I have this list of to-dos. It's not a really realistic list, so it's 10 to-dos. And what you can do here is I can remove an element, and at this point it goes quite quickly because it's a local application. It's a very, very small number of to-dos, so let's make this a little bit more realistic to do, right? So I'll just change. I'll go to initialize here, and instead of 2 items, I'll just change this to a realistic to-do list, right? Let's put 5,000 items on there. All right, so I'll restart it. Maybe to-do was a little bit, I don't know. I'm at the edge here, but okay, now I have a more realistic to-do list, and okay, but then when you do something like deleting something, this takes a lot more time. And you also see the page jumping, which is normal. You're rendering a new page. I can also add a new to-do item. So, right, yeah, too much. There's too much to-dos here, so I should have done. So this gets added at the bottom. I'll not scroll there. You can also mark it as done, for example, or you can have an in-place edit. So if I double click it, and now it's re-rendering the entire page, it's going to open. It's not going to open. Anyway, what I wanted to show you is that this is, of course, not the thing you want to present to your user. You want to have something a lot more interactive on the page. Oh, now it's opening. Okay, exactly. So that's when you say, okay, at that point in time in Seaside, you use jQuery. But first, so what is happening, of course, at the moment in Seaside is that you have this WA to-do component, which has a list of subcomponents, WA to-do items. There's a 5,000 of them. You render them on the page. You click some action to do, like deleting or adding a new item in this case, and then you're just adding a new component and you do the complete tree re-rendering, sending the entire HTML to your web page, and the user just gets confronted with an entirely new page, completely out of context, and so forth. Or you open up, and in this case you would be doing a Seaside call in Seaside, and this is also essential later on in the demo. The call in Seaside, it replaces one component with another component. So here, the WA to-do item, you replace it with a to-do item editor. So at that place in your to-do list, you're rendering an editor for that item. So you do a call to that item, and then you can later on answer when you're done editing. So every action triggers a full page rendering request, and each page is a continuation in Seaside, and the implementation is nicely, completely server-side only, the way we like it, but not the way we like it to present to our user. So what people then do is we will be using jQuery and actually do partial page updates. So I have another version of my to-do jQuery application here, well, the to-do application, but then built completely as a single page web application in Seaside, because anything I do here right now, and this has immediately the realistic to-do list. If I click here, you see immediately that only this item gets removed, or when I do this, I mark it as done. I do the editor here, I change whatever. So this all gets happened because I've written jQuery scripts which do these partial updates. So the only thing that happens going back to Seaside is just manually implementing, using jQuery and Seaside, manually implementing these partial page updates. And that goes really fast. The downside is the implementation is a lot more complicated. So if I go to the to-do with jQuery, and I didn't walk through the to-do application yet, but you have these really traditional, well, there's only two components. There is the WA to-do component, which then has subcomponents, which are the to-do items. And these are the things you will need to write in jQuery, in Seaside. So for example, I'll take this one to trigger the checkbox. Okay, that's an easy one. But okay, you say, well, when I'm clicking on this item, the only thing you need to be doing is saying that this element is marked as done. And in this case, you're actually only changing a property there. Or if you trigger an edit, right? Trigger an edit, and you're putting actually, let's do another thing here. I go to the jQuery item here. No, everything is on the, so you're actually writing all these scripts, and I'm not going to try to explain them. If you want to know more, I can. So these are things which we have, of course, throughout the entire YesPlan, and you're actually using a different language here. You're using JavaScript and jQuery, but you're just generating from the Seaside part. So you're doing lots of things here, making it really too complicated. So just as a summary, if you're doing jQuery, then you just have one page states, and you're just replacing them continuously in place, and you also never render the complete page again. So every action here triggers a XML HTTP request, or also known as the jQuery AJAX request. You have just one page and one continuation in Seaside, but you have a distributed way of thinking. You need a server-side implementation and a client-side implementation, which you often generate from the server side. And that works, but it's a technical maintenance problem. So that's why these frameworks like Hotwire come in and actually try to develop, or you develop this application more like a traditional Seaside application, which does page-based rendering, and have the advantages of doing it with jQuery, having partial updates. So how does that work in Hotwire? So in Hotwire, you have the concept of turbo frames. And a turbo frame is something you need to identify in your page as an element of the page which you would want to see updated or appended, prepended, or replaced at some point in time. So you identify a couple of elements which you want this behavior later on. You want to do these partial updates. And of course, in this case, the turbo frames in my demo application, they are the to-do items themselves, because these are the things you will be changing, doing the partial updates with. The way you then implement that in Seaside is you have the Seaside Hotwire integration. It provides you with a decorator. So your existing components you already have in your Seaside application, you just wrap them with a decorator, and then they become a turbo component, a turbo frame. And these turbo frames are then how you get started. So I'll first present this and I'll go to the demo then. So of course, if you think about call and answer, if I'm doing an edit of a single to-do item, that means I'm going to replace this to-do item with a to-do item editor. So an input field with the name in it so I can edit it. And when I'm done editing, I will answer it again and put the to-do item back into place. Links inside of a turbo frame in Hotwire do exactly that. So if you do an action from within this turbo frame, it will by default replace only that contents of the frame. So that's exactly what you want. So the Seaside call and answer maps exactly to these turbo frames and actions inside of, or links inside of a turbo frame. I'll go to the implementation. Well, first this. All right. No. Okay. So this is then the implementation of the to-do application using Seaside Hotwired, or the part of Turbo. And I just added, so for demonstration purposes, I haven't done only the double click, but if I click here on edit, it's actually doing the replacement of this single frame. And of course, Hotwire doesn't require any changes to your server-side framework, but if you do change your framework, you can have some advantages. So if you take a look at the, I'll just do nothing here. So for example, what we have done, of course, is when I do this, the contents here, and it's maybe a little bit small, but just as a way to demonstrate, Seaside will only re-render this particular component as well. So you're not going to re-render everything on the server side and send the entire response. Although Hotwire works like that, so you don't need any modifications to Seaside. But if you do that, then you're losing some of the advantages, because if you do the call and answer, you're only asking Seaside, please just render this frame again. And that's the only thing I need. And that's actually going into the response. So how do you do that? Take a look here at the Turbo To-Do application. So when I'm initializing, I'm creating this set of to-do items you see on the web page. So I do an add to-do here. So in the add to-do here, this is where I'm initializing my to-do item components. And what I'm doing is just adding a decoration. So the version without the turbo frame just leaves out this statement. So you have to think about, okay, which components of my Seaside application I want to see partial page updates for, and you just wrap those. If I then go inside of the implementation of the Turbo To-Do item and go to the part of the Seaside implementation where the edit link is being rendered, which I clicked. So when I click on the edit link, I want to see the editor popping up. And that's, this is what you would have seen in a traditional Seaside implementation. You have the callback, and the callback says, well, call this component. Seaside will update the state of components and will re-render everything for your next page. Now I have to do a turbo call here, so it's a little bit different, though you don't have to. Well, you don't have to, because I will just open what's a turbo call at the moment. So it just does the call to the same component, but again wrapped as a turbo frame component. So it's adding the decorator. That's the only addition inside of the difference between turbo call and call, right? So that's just this addition. Otherwise, you would have to do that manually. So when I do this, and I do this edit here, I'm only replacing this piece of code. So think about your 5,000 items in your to-do list. Normally you would render all 5,000 of them. No, you're just re-rendering one of them. And also, of course, replacing only one of them on your web page. So I can edit it, of course, here and so on. Now, the same thing happens when you have, now you can do more with these turbo frames. And that's called turbo streams. So the turbo frames, they're really like about, okay, you have this action inside of them, and by default, we will just replace the same turbo frame. Hotwire has a lot more options. You can also say target another frame and so on, but I'll not dive into that, but you have some flexibility of how to respond to these actions and which partial updates. But another thing is sometimes you just don't want one element of the page being replaced. You want to do different things. If I want to add a new to-do item, I want it to be appended to my list of to-do items. If I want to complete something else, just change another one at the same time. Having a counter, of course, for example, of all the to-do items, then I would need to update multiple places in my page. And for that, it's what a thing called turbo streams. And you can define a turbo stream as a set of actions you do on elements of the page, which is append, prepend, replace, update, before, after. They're all there. And this is the way you can respond to a particular form submission in this case. So Hotwire does require you to change a bit of places. You would not have forms in your HTML before, but you require a form there. So you will see in the implementation here. So here in, so for example, the checkbox, which would set a to-do item as being completed or not, I had to change this, well, as a demonstration, I changed it into a form. And then you can define a turbo stream callback. And a turbo stream callback gets as an argument a builder to build a turbo stream. So it just gives you, I'll click the implement. Oh, yeah, this one. So this is the class. And you just see these methods on there, which are the particular actions you can do, and you can pass a renderable to them. So, and in this case, what I want to do is, of course, I want to just update this to-do item here with myself. So I'm just updating, and here you're passing an ID, because that's what you need to pass. You need to say, well, I want to replace the thing with this ID. And I just replace it with this renderable. So renderable in Seaside can be a component, can be a block, can be anything. Well, more or less. So the same thing, for example, for destroying. So I also wrapped it inside of a form, because that makes Hotwire respond to it and saying, okay, I can actually accept a turbo stream as response, which actually will contain changes to multiple places in the page. And that means, okay, just do this turbo stream callback, and then I'm just saying, well, remove a component, remove myself, right? And that means it will just tell Hotwire to remove this element from the page. So click this here, then it only removes this one, and that's a little bit small, but you can probably read, it just has turbo stream action, remove, and that's the target ID that's generated. So there's nothing much more to it, so that gives you the flexibility of doing the things you were doing before with jQuery, using a framework where Seaside has a bit more knowledge about what you're doing. And that's essential, because Seaside now knows if you were writing some jQuery expression, you could do anything on the page. It doesn't know what happened on the page. And this is essential. Now you have a set of abstractions where Seaside knows better what you're doing to your page, and it can do a little bit of more optimizations there. So first thing, of course, which you already saw, is that, okay, we only need to re-render this particular part of the page. So I'm just sending this one, which can give you huge speed ups, because, for example, in YesPlan, we have a huge calendar. It takes a couple of seconds to render completely. If we would have do that on every action, it's completely unacceptable. So we use jQuery a lot and transitioning, looking at using this. So you just divide your page in turbo frames by decorating your existing components, and then you have to adapt some links and forms to use turbo call or turbo stream callback. So of course, it's not like a free lunch if you're thinking about the Ajaxifier of Seaside, but that just renders the complete page every time again, right? And then it's free, but of course you don't get advantages. What are then the advantages? Well, first of all, you can write your entire behavior completely on the server side. You cannot do everything you can do with JavaScript, which is actually in Hotwire where stimulus comes in without JavaScript, so which is where stimulus comes in into part of Hotwire. So I would say you can do less JavaScript if you're using this. And the optimization rendering you've seen already, but that's something which I'm still working on. Because Seaside doesn't know which parts of the page you are changing, it also has to maintain all the state of all the callbacks you ever rendered on the page. So you have actually, if you're doing the implementation of the to-do application with jQuery, you will see that the size of the callback dictionary from Seaside is just growing, because for all it knows, you're just putting new stuff on the page, even if you're replacing the complete page. So we see that in YesPlan going up into the millions of callbacks. Luckily running on Gemstone, so we just keep running there, but it becomes a performance issue. So with Hotwire, you're telling Seaside, I will replace this component. And Seaside also knows, oh, but inside of that component, I rendered this callback. So it's no longer on the page because you replaced it. So I'll just throw it out. So the work there will require me to take a look at how busy doing that, but that's work in progress. But I don't see any issue that not terminating, and that's really going to be part of it. So, so it's currently, what can you do if you're interested in looking at this, and this is very important. I've actually implemented a couple of versions of this. First, I was using the Seaside counter application, then I moved to the to-do application, and that made me actually change the entire way of working with it. And now I'm trying to implement this as part of YesPlan. So if you're interested in using this, this is really important that you try to use it, and then we can actually come up with or see whether the abstractions that are offered make sense. Like for example, I chose to use a decorator for your component, but you could also say, well, I make a component do subclassing to say when my component needs to be a turbo frame. And all those kinds of things. So these kinds of decisions are still a little bit moving, which is why it's in alpha preview mode, so the API might change, although it's working as you've seen. Another thing is that currently there is a limitation because I've told you, okay, if you do an action from within a turbo frame, it will always replace this component in the same page. Hotwire offers you two possibilities, and actually the other one is default, which means that you're advancing the history. So if you would be using Hotwire in the default mode, you would actually be able to go back when you're adding and removing a to-do item and so on. But because Seaside has other elements on the page which need to refer to that same continuation, we need to default to the replace. So you actually update your history. So your back button just goes away. Thinking about how to do that will require a bit more changes in the way Seaside encodes the continuation as part of the link. So that's another thing. Turbo streams can also be done via WebSockets, which means you can just send the turbo stream over a WebSocket to update your page without the user needing to do a request. Now you will say, well, Seaside doesn't have any WebSockets, and you're right. There is actually a demo implementation of replacing the Comet component with WebSockets you can find on GitHub. And I'll bring this together so that we can actually use WebSockets in this case as well. And a little bit of error handling. So while developing this, I noticed that whenever something goes wrong, you're a little bit annoyed because you don't see the Seaside error page coming up because it's inside of the turbo frame. So you need to think about ways of doing that. So, but currently it's in a branch. By the end of the week, it will be part of the master branch, but as an alpha preview mode. So you can, it's actually as an extension to Seaside. You just need to configure your application to use another callback continuation in a configuration, and then you're able to use Hotwire. All right, I'm in time. So thank you for listening, and yeah, I'll happy to take questions. All right, so I saw Anik's hand raised first, or okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry? You mean how stable it is in development? Well, it's actually, it has been, because I first tried 2 years ago, and so the people of the Ruby on Rails, they use it to implement Hey, and they are actually changing a little bit the API since then, and there's some stuff they added, but they are using it in production, so they cannot just change it like that anyway. So if that is the question, I don't know how stable it is, because until right now I've just been prototyping with it. It hasn't, I think this is a version from March and it hasn't changed, but they are using it in production. So at its, and you see new things coming up being added. Yeah, if that's more or less the question, how stable. It works, right? So, but if you mean the stability of the API, I guess. Yeah, email client by. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
How does it mark the frame on the HTML level?
Just as an extra XML element, so turbo frame, the thing you saw. So it marks it as an extra HTML element. So all the places which are, yeah, it's a little bit difficult to demonstrate here, but all the elements, all the to-do items, they are actually wrapped with turbo frame. So, and so that's inside. That's how Hotwire knows that this is turbo frame, because it's all HTML. Yeah.
Does it somehow break rendering in some situations?
That's a good question. I hope not. So that's a good question. I don't think so, right? Because yeah, that's what they do.
Do you know HTMX? This, let's say, alternative that is kind of gaining traction.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
And, yeah, what would be like the comparison?
Yeah.
Are you willing to explore this? I am thinking that for other projects.
Yes.
And it's pretty good to see that Hotwire is over there. But HTMX is kind of gaining traction and exploring stuff that I don't know if you've seen Hotwire. So can you give us some kind of comparison or something about like this other alternative?
Yeah, I was fearing your question because I can't give the comparison, although I know HTMX, and I was looking actually at both. So when I was looking at these things, I also encountered HTMX, and I played a little bit around, but as I'm saying, these ideas have been like floating around for more than 1 year already. So I can't give you any comparison. So I settled with Hotwired because when I read it, I made immediately the parallels to how it could be integrated into Seaside. And started playing around with it. But I think, indeed, a lot of the things I've been saying, I mean, it's the same problems. I mean, HTMX is doing the same thing, and you see people doing that. So it would be really cool if somebody creates a Seaside HTMX extension as well. Yeah, but yeah, you're right. I can't give you any real comparison on what would be different because I haven't taken a look at comparing them. Yeah, but valid question. Yes. A little bit louder.
Okay, so I would like to just if it's a solution comparable with the ES frameworks like Svelte, React, well, in the sense that they manage a virtual DOM. So this is a kind of similar solution.
Yeah, well, yeah. Things like frameworks like React, they would do like also a complete re-rendering and then only partially do replacement for you behind the scenes. Of course, here you're not doing anything with the shadow DOM. You're just, well, because you're on the server, you just need to decide, okay, I only need to send this, and Hotwire will only replace this. There is actually a thing you can use because which does use the shadow DOM to replace, which is called morph DOM. So you can actually customize the replacement function, so that when you update the component with the new HTML, that you morph it. And then it means what morph DOM does is it will compare the two HTMLs and actually do only the partial replacement. But you have like the hard non-generation, which is from the server side, because you don't have access to any DOM there, of course. But yeah, the replacement. And actually, I haven't demoed it there, but you could do that. And that's actually one of the elements on their webpage. They say you can also pass in a custom rendering function like morph DOM if you want to use it for the replacement of the turbo frames. Yes. Yeah. All right. Then I guess I'm in time. Thank you.